chosen one, listen to this now. Not every person receives a calling, and even among those who do, only a few are allowed to walk a path of special depth and power, a path that can be described as the level of fulfillment, the level of Omega. This is not about superiority. It is not about elevating yourself in the eyes of the world or feeling better than others. There is absolutely no place here for the human ego. This is a story about a plan that was determined long before your first breath. It is about a divine decision that was made before the beginning of time, when your soul had already been marked with a special sign, a rare spiritual code before which even darkness recoils when you begin to awaken. In the Holy Scripture, it is written, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you came out of the womb, I sanctified you." These are not beautiful lines meant only for inspiration or a poetic image. It is a prophetic statement directly connected to your life. People on the Omega path do not shout for attention, do not seek recognition, and do not impress others with external effects. They are distinguished by something else. Inside them burns a fire that does not belong to this world. They carry within themselves a plan designed by heaven and written into the invisible, and their mere presence can change the space around them. Sometimes you do not need to say a single word. It is enough to enter a room, and the atmosphere begins to change. Invisible processes begin to move. Lines of destiny rearrange themselves. Healing begins to flow, not because of who you are as a person, but because of what you belong to. Have you ever wondered why your path seems so difficult? Why does loneliness seem to follow you like a shadow? Why do you feel almost nowhere completely in harmony with your surroundings? This is not a curse and not a mistake. It is a confirmation. The rarer the calling, the harder the test. God does not entrust this frequency to everyone. Only a soul that can withstand his fire receives such a burden. And when such a soul begins to awaken, heaven leans toward it. But at the same time, darkness also becomes active. This is the reality. When you step into your destiny, it becomes clear what distinguishes such people from others. Everything is different. And now, as you take a step forward, you stand as if on a threshold. This is the moment when it becomes important to acknowledge your readiness. Not formally, not with words, but internally. Because what follows concerns what many people consider their weaknesses, even though in reality, they are signs of their spiritual destiny. This message is not meant for everyone. But if you have felt strange your whole life, out of place, too sensitive, or too deep for this world, then perhaps right now many things will begin to come together into a complete picture. The first sign appears like this. Your confirmation does not come through external success. It reveals itself through inner contradictions. Within you, it seems as if different eras are united. In one moment, you breathe ancient wisdom. In the next, you preserve a childlike openness and purity. You are able to sit beside another person's pain as if it were your own. And at the same time, there is a strength within you that frightens even darkness in silence. You have walked through fire, but in your eyes the reflection of heaven still remains. Sometimes you sense people before they even begin to speak, yet you yourself are often misunderstood. You give healing and support to others, but in return, you often receive wounds. You can see the scale of destiny, yet you stumble over simple earthly things. This is not chaos, and it is not failure. It is a special configuration. You were not created for the ordinary. Your sensitivity is not a weakness. It is a divine filtering system built within you. But this configuration has its price. The second sign is that your life has always been under spiritual observation. You are not simply rejected. You are often misunderstood, misrepresented, and even judged by those closest to you. You were a prototype of heaven, not a copy of the earth. You experienced things that did not match your age, and that was not coincidence. It was confrontation on a spiritual level. Darkness saw your light, before you recognized it yourself. You were marked early because your very presence threatens the structures of darkness, and yet you are still here. You did not become permanently bitter. You were not completely broken, and you did not close your heart. You are still capable of love and hope. That is not just survival. That is a manifestation of spiritual power. The third sign is the feeling that you are being prepared for something greater, even though you cannot clearly define it. Perhaps you have often caught yourself thinking, I do not know why, but I feel that I am here for a reason. This is not arrogance. It is the memory of your mission. Omega souls carry encoded instructions within themselves. The full understanding may come later, but the attraction has always been there. It is a quiet call that never lets you fully rest. You find yourself in unusual circumstances and go through intense phases of awakening, not by your own initiative, but as preparation. Just as David tended sheep before facing the giant, your invisibility was training. Every crisis prepared you for a battle you did not yet know existed. The fourth sign is that your growth is not optional. For others, pauses are acceptable, but you are constantly shaken. Others can ignore the signs, but you are repeatedly uprooted, broken, and rebuilt again. Why? Because your frequency is the key. When you rise, others rise as well. When you remember who you are, the lines of destiny begin to align. But when you forget it, the processes slow down. You are a bridge between dimensions. Through you, heaven flows. That is why the pressure does not stop, and comfort never lasts long. The kingdom will not allow you to waste this calling. If you have ever felt that you are too big for this world, or that the world has never found a place for you, then understand this. You were not created for conformity. You were created to break the ordinary in a sacred way. You came here to reveal. And the moment you accept that, darkness begins to lose ground. The deeper you move into this awareness, the clearer other signs also become. There is one sign that few people speak about openly. It is connected to the fact that the spiritual world recognizes you. You have had dreams, visions, and sudden revelations in the most intense moments, encounters that cannot simply be dismissed as imagination. Sometimes you feel familiar with people, as if you had met them before outside of this life. These are not coincidences. This is recognition on the level of the soul. Even when you forget, the spiritual world knows who you are. You are under protection, not because you are spared from everything, but because you are being guided toward your destiny. You were not created for a sheltered life. You were called to remember your rank. You may also have noticed that you never completely fit anywhere, not even in spiritual communities. You are too awake for superficiality, too honest for games, and too deep for formalities. But your soul never tried to adapt. It came to activate. You see what others would rather avoid seeing, and you cannot remain where the truth is blurred, even if it costs you comfort. In this case, loneliness is not defeat. It is a consequence of clarity. There were moments when the boundary between worlds seemed to fade. In silence, in pain, in prayer, or in worship, time seemed to change its density, and something ancient flowed through you. In those moments, you did not only experience the presence of God, you became a mediator. That is why your words sometimes carry more weight than you expect, and your silence can speak louder than words. You were not sent to change the world by force. You were sent to shift its axis while remaining aligned with the original frequency of creation. Perhaps for a long time, you tried to fix something inside you that was never broken. What seemed excessive was actually part of the plan. The world taught you to be normal, to dim your fire, to not stand out. But heaven never wrote a script of ordinary life for you. You were not created to seek approval. You were created to live in alignment. When you ignore that, fatigue appears, restlessness appears, and a feeling of spiritual emptiness grows. Not because you are weak, but because you are out of alignment. Every time you betray your true nature for the comfort of others, your soul protests. This protest feels like pain, but in reality, it is the voice of the Spirit saying that it cannot abandon this mission. When you begin to awaken, you no longer remain unnoticed. Both light and shadow begin to react. Strange disturbances appear. Old distractions suddenly return, and a feeling of fog surrounds your thoughts. This is not imagination. It is resistance. You are not just a human being. You are a carrier of frequency. You are a node within the divine system, and your confusion benefits those who do not want your clarity. That is why you must guard your inner gates. What you watch, what you listen to, with whom you communicate, and where you place your attention either strengthens your signal or scatters it. You can no longer afford to be naive. You were not created for a dimmed light. You were sent to awaken without abandoning yourself. There comes a moment when knowledge must become embodiment, when theory is no longer enough, and the soul begins to long for a life in truth. This is exactly that moment. The preparation is finished. For an Omega soul, there is no detailed map. There is only the direction and the one who sent you. And that is enough. Your path will be unusual and sometimes lonely, but it will never be empty. Inside you, a fire will burn that first purifies before it warms. And if you surrender to it, your life will no longer be a question. It will become an answer. You will understand that you are no longer searching for signs, because you yourself have become the sign. Awakening destroys before it builds. Old identities fall away. False connections disappear, and that can be painful. But beneath it lies freedom. You stop hiding. You stop making yourself small, and you stop playing roles. This is not an ending. It is a state of balance, a quiet but unbreakable strength. You no longer seek recognition. You become rooted. And when you are rooted, you become like a mountain. Storms do not destroy you. They shape you. You begin to understand that simply existing is already a miracle. You no longer try to create moments. You become the moment. And now the most important question remains. Are you ready to leave the old version of yourself behind in order to become who you truly are? Because it is impossible to awaken only halfway. This is a path that must be walked completely. It can be frightening and it demands everything. But the alternative is a life of quiet suffocation. You did not go through everything you have experienced just to disappear again. You were called to initiate, not to imitate. And now that you have remembered, you cannot forget it again. You are not here simply to survive. You are here to move something, and it is time to live as if you know that. If these words resonate with you, if something inside you has moved and responded with a quiet but determined yes, then it is important not to miss this moment. That is why I ask you to take a simple but conscious step right now. Subscribe to the channel and write the words, "I am ready," in the comments. This is not just an action for algorithms or a formal gesture. It is a symbol of inner agreement, a sign that you are no longer running from your calling and that you allow this path to unfold in reality. When you do this consciously, you seal the decision of your soul in a certain way. After such a step, many things begin to be perceived differently. Suddenly, you notice that the silence around you becomes deeper and the inner noise becomes quieter. This does not mean that the outer world has instantly changed, but that you have stopped resisting your own nature. In that moment, a loud transformation does not begin, but a subtle realignment. It feels as if you are returning to your original position, to the point where spirit and destiny align again. And right here, the next level of understanding begins to open. You start to realize that all your past fractures, losses, pauses, and delays were not failures. They were pauses necessary for calibration. God is not in a hurry the way humans are. He works in layers, depths, and seasons. And if you ever felt that life was holding you back, preventing you from moving forward and constantly returning you to inner work, it was because your vessel had to become stable. Omega souls cannot simply be given power. They must first learn how to carry it without destroying themselves or others. During that time, you may have felt that the supports around you were removed. Old goals lost their meaning. Familiar dreams no longer inspired you, and what truly inspires you still has no clear form. It is a state of in-between, between the old self and what you are becoming. And this is where many people become afraid because the ego loves certainty, but the spirit needs emptiness in order to be filled with something new. Do not run away from this state. Your true stability is being built within it. Gradually, you will notice that your sensitivity increases. You react more strongly to lies, to falseness, and to the gap between words and vibration. What you once tolerated now creates an inner protest. This does not make you difficult. It makes you honest. Your soul no longer accepts compromises that move you away from truth. And that is another sign of maturity, not a problem. You may also notice that your circle of people begins to change. Some people quietly disappear without arguments or explanations, while others become irritated without an obvious reason. This is natural. Your frequency is changing, and not everyone is ready to meet you there. Do not hold on to those who try to pull you back into your old version. Bless them and let them go. The space that opens will eventually be filled by people capable of meeting you on a new level. An important part of this phase is returning to simple but deep practices, not out of obligation, but from inner need. Prayer becomes a conversation instead of a duty. Silence no longer frightens you, but begins to heal you. Solitude stops feeling like punishment and becomes a place of strength. You begin to understand that in these moments, true alignment happens. Where there are no spectators, no roles, and no expectations, the Spirit speaks most clearly. You also begin to realize that you do not have to convince anyone of your truth or explain your path. Your life itself begins to speak. The calm with which you respond to chaos, the depth with which you listen, and the honesty with which you live all become a message. You no longer waste energy proving anything. Instead, you focus on your presence, and that changes everything. At some point, you will notice that fear no longer controls your decisions, even though it may still appear. The difference is that you no longer submit to it. You see it, you acknowledge it, and you keep moving forward. It is not the absence of fear, but the presence of trust. Trust in God, trust in the process, and trust that even if you cannot see the entire picture, it is already held in His hands. This is where quiet power begins, without noise, without demonstration, and without the need to be seen. You do what you must do because you cannot do otherwise. You choose truth even when it is uncomfortable. You choose light even when it demands responsibility. You choose the path that is aligned with your soul rather than the expectations of others. It is important to understand that you are not responsible for saving everyone. You are not responsible for awakening others. Your task is to remain in balance. Everything else flows from that. Those who need it will feel it, and those who do not will pass by. And that is natural. The Omega path is not a path for the masses. It is precise, deep, and demanding. And remember that you did not enter this current by accident. You did not randomly feel this resonance. This is neither the end nor the climax. It is the beginning of a more conscious, balanced, and honest path. A path where you no longer lose yourself, but gradually return home to your essence, to your destiny, and to the presence of God within you.